What if I told you that for over 95% of our time on Earth, we, Homo sapiens, were a species with no memory? Not that we couldn't remember things. We remembered the turn of the seasons, the faces of our children, the paths to good hunting grounds. But our collective memory, the memory of our entire tribe, our culture, our species, that memory was fragile. It lived only in the stories of elders, the songs of shamans, and the minds of the living. When they died, a library burned to the ground. And what if I told you that the invention that changed everything, the one that allowed us to conquer time, to speak to the dead, and to build empires that spanned continents, wasn't born from a poet's dream or a king's decree? It began with a receipt for beer. This is the story of the single most powerful invention in human history. It's the technology you're using right this second, perhaps without even realizing it. This is the origin story of writing. Our story begins long before cities, kings, or even farming. It begins deep within the earth, some 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. Inside these caves, our distant ancestors left their mark. They painted powerful animals, abstract geometric shapes, and hauntingly, the outlines of their own hands. A simple, profound declaration across the millennia. I was here. Were they just art? An anthropologist might say they were far more. Perhaps they were part of a hunting ritual, an attempt to capture the spirit of the animal. Or maybe they were a shaman's vision, a map to the spirit world. Or perhaps they were the earliest form of storytelling, a record of a great hunt, a tribal history passed down in pigment and shadow. These symbols weren't writing as we know it. A picture of a bison means bison. It doesn't mean the bison we hunted last Tuesday. It was proto-writing, a system of ideas, not a system of language. For tens of thousands of years, this was enough. But then humanity did something new. We stopped just hunting and gathering. We started building. Welcome to Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, around 3400 BCE. This is the cradle of civilization. And civilization is complicated. When you have thousands of people living together, you have problems you never had in a small tribe. Who owns which field? How much grain is in the temple granary? How many sheep did I trade for that pottery? Human memory, our old, reliable tool, was suddenly not up to the task. The Sumerians needed a better system, an external hard drive for their entire city. It started simply. They used small clay tokens to represent goods, a cone for a small measure of grain, a sphere for a larger one, a cylinder for a sheep. To keep track of a deal, they'd seal these tokens inside a clay envelope. But then a lazy genius, and history is full of them, had a brilliant idea. Why put the tokens inside the clay when you could just press them onto the surface? And then an even better idea. Why use tokens at all? Why not just draw a picture of the token or the thing it represents directly onto a wet clay tablet with a sharpened reed? This was the birth of cuneiform. At first, it was simple pictographs. A drawing of a head of barley meant barley. A drawing of a head meant head. But how do you draw love, payment, or believe? This is where the Sumerians made the single greatest intellectual leap in history. They realized a symbol didn't have to represent a thing. It could represent a sound. It's called the rebus principle, and you've used it to solve puzzles. Imagine trying to write the English word belief. You could draw a picture of a bee and a picture of a leaf. Bee, leaf, belief. Suddenly, writing could capture the sound of spoken language. A picture of a head was no longer just head or sag in Sumerian. It could now also represent the sound sag in a longer word. The system exploded in complexity and potential. Now they could write down not just 5 sheep, but poems, laws, letters. In fact, among the oldest tablets ever found is one detailing rations of barley for workers, the key ingredient for beer. It is, in essence, the world's first beer receipt, just as we mentioned. They even wrote epic myths like the story of Gilgamesh, humanity's first great work of literature. But cuneiform, with its hundreds of complex wedge-shaped signs, was incredibly difficult to learn. It created a powerful class of professional scribes. Literacy was a superpower held by a select few. Meanwhile, another great civilization was rising along the banks of the Nile, and they too felt the need to write. But they took a very different path. If Sumerian cuneiform was practical and administrative, Egyptian hieroglyphs were divine, magical, and breathtakingly beautiful. The word hieroglyph itself comes from the Greek for sacred carvings. They believed writing was a gift from the god Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom. Like cuneiform, hieroglyphs started as pictures. An owl meant owl. But like the Sumerians, the Egyptians also made the leap to sounds. The symbol for mouth, pronounced ro, could be used for the R sound in any word. But the Egyptians added another layer of genius. At the end of a word, they would often add a silent picture called a determinative to give the reader a clue about the word's meaning. For example, the symbol spelling out a man's name would be followed by a small drawing of a seated man. The symbols for a type of tree would be followed by a small drawing of a tree. It was a brilliant way to avoid confusion. For thousands of years, these beautiful symbols adorned tombs and temples. But as the Egyptian empire fell and new religions took hold, the knowledge of how to read them vanished. They became a silent mystery. Until one fateful day in 1799, when Napoleon's soldiers, digging fortifications in the Egyptian town of Rosetta, unearthed a broken slab of black stone. The Rosetta Stone was the ultimate key. It contained the same decree written in 3 scripts: formal hieroglyphs, a simpler Egyptian script called Demotic, and ancient Greek, which scholars could read. A brilliant young Frenchman, Jean-François Champollion, obsessed over the stone. He realized that the names of the pharaohs, like Ptolemy and Cleopatra, were circled in an oval shape called a cartouche. By matching the sounds of the Greek names to the symbols in the cartouches, he cracked the code. After 1,500 years of silence, the voices of the pharaohs could speak again. Cuneiform and hieroglyphs were powerful, but they were elite. You had to learn hundreds, even thousands of signs. True literacy was for the 1%. The Great Revolution, the one that put the power of writing into the hands of ordinary people, didn't happen in a palace or a temple. It happened in a mine. Around 1850 BCE, here in the Sinai Desert, Canaanite workers who spoke a Semitic language were working for their Egyptian masters. They saw the magical hieroglyphs all around them. They understood their power. But they couldn't spend 20 years in scribe school to learn them. They needed something simpler, faster. So, they performed one of the most brilliant acts of cultural hacking in history. They looked at the Egyptian hieroglyphs and borrowed the pictures, but used them in a completely new way. This is the acrophonic principle. They took a picture, said the word for it in their own language, and then used that picture to represent only the first sound of that word. For example, the Egyptian symbol for an ox. In their language, the word for ox was aleph. So they used a simplified drawing of an ox head not to mean ox, but just for the first sound of that word, a soft throat sound, the ancestor of our letter A. The word for house, or bayit, became a symbol for the B sound. The word for water, or mayim, became a wavy line for the M sound. Do you see what's happening? Aleph, bayit, alphabet. This was it, the quantum leap. No more memorizing hundreds of symbols. All you needed were 20 to 30 simple signs that represented the basic sounds of your language. Anyone could learn it in a few weeks. It was an explosion of freedom. Before we see how this brilliant invention took over the world, here are a couple of little-known quirks from our journey. Ever wondered about the ampersand, the and symbol? It's actually a piece of written history hiding in plain sight. Roman scribes, writing quickly, would often join the letters E and T, which is the Latin word for and. Over centuries of hurried writing, that combination of E and T morphed into the elegant and we use today. It's literally a fossil of the word et. And what about uppercase and lowercase letters? They weren't designed together. For centuries, languages like Latin were written only in capitals, majuscules. But monks in medieval monasteries, painstakingly copying books by hand, developed a faster, more rounded style of writing to save time and precious parchment. This minuscule script became our lowercase. The two were eventually combined into the dual alphabet system we use today. So you can thank a frugal monk for your lowercase letters. This revolutionary new script might have remained a local secret if not for the greatest traders and sailors of the ancient world, the Phoenicians. Based in modern-day Lebanon, the Phoenicians weren't conquerors, they were connectors. Their ships were the internet of the Iron Age, linking cultures from Egypt to Spain. And for a merchant, what's the most important tool? A simple, easy-to-learn way to keep records, write contracts, and communicate with partners across the sea. They adopted that Canaanite script and perfected it. They streamlined the symbols, making them faster to write, and settled on a standard set of 22 consonants. No vowels, just consonants. For their language, it worked just fine. As they sailed the Mediterranean, they didn't just carry cargo like timber, glass, and their famous purple dye. They carried their alphabet. They gave this incredible gift to civilizations all over the ancient world, including one group of people who would take it and give it one final, crucial tweak. When the Greeks learned the alphabet from the Phoenicians around the 8th century BCE, they loved it. But they had a problem. The Phoenician alphabet had symbols for sounds that didn't exist in Greek. And Greek, unlike Semitic languages, relied heavily on vowels. You couldn't write it clearly without them. So the Greeks performed the final brilliant hack. They took the Phoenician letters for sounds they didn't need and repurposed them. The Phoenician letter aleph, that soft throat sound, was useless to the Greeks, so they used it to represent the vowel sound alpha. The letter ayin, another throat sound, became the vowel o, omicron. They were the first to create a writing system with dedicated symbols for both consonants and vowels. This was the first true alphabet as we know it, a complete toolkit for transcribing any spoken sound. This simple, elegant, and complete system fueled the explosion of Greek culture. The philosophy of Plato, the plays of Sophocles, the history of Herodotus. It was so easy to learn that literacy became widespread, a cornerstone of their new idea of democracy. The rest, as they say, is history. The Greeks passed their alphabet to the Etruscans in Italy, who then passed it to a rising power on the Tiber River, Rome. The Romans adopted the alphabet and modified it for their own language, Latin. They changed some letter shapes, dropped others, and famously added the letter G by putting a little bar on the letter C. As the Roman Empire expanded, their legions, their laws, and their language marched across Europe. The Latin alphabet became the foundation for countless scripts. Think about it. The A you use to write an email began its life as a picture of an ox in an Egyptian mine over 3,500 years ago. The M in your name is the ancient wave of the sea. Every time you write, you are summoning ancient magic. You are using a technology refined over millennia by Sumerian accountants, Egyptian priests, Canaanite miners, Phoenician sailors, and Greek philosophers. From a mark on a cave wall to a bill for beer. From a prayer to a pharaoh to the code that runs our digital world. The story of writing is the story of us. It is the story of an idea taking flight, breaking free from the limits of a single voice, a single lifetime. It's what allows a thought born in ancient Athens to spark a debate in your mind today. It's what allows a story from a grandparent to be read by a great-grandchild they'll never meet. Writing is our collective memory, our shared consciousness. It is the thread that connects us all in the grand, ongoing story of humanity. And that story, with every email, every book, every text you send, is still being written. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Origin Stories. If you were one of those first writers, what's the first thing you would have wanted to write down? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed unraveling this piece of our shared history, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the origins of our world. See you next time.